I don't.
Yep.
I probably just should sit this one out until we do the full episode. But I will say that I vacillated from just like complete blind rage to like, all right, that's okay. Like just, as I read it, each new paragraph, each new heading, it was like, what the? All right, it looks really bad when you pull up that table that shows the half caster. You're like, I'm going to lose it.
Welcome to Monsters and Multiclass. I'm Ellie.
I'm Jared Bornigal.
And I'm Will Meldon.
And on this episode, we are taking a look at the new One D&D UA that just came out, the Player's Handbook Playtest 5. Not catchy name. So with this one, we're going to do, for the sake of just being timely and kind of getting something out, we are doing a quick overview of it. I know that's usually not us at all and not something we're good at, so we're trying it. We're going to try and keep it shorter, give a kind of an overview of the general design philosophies real quickly, what we feel of the classes, things like that. But then because we are us over the next couple months, we will absolutely release probably an hour-long episode on every class change that's out there, or every class that's out there, going into depths on the changes and picking it apart and seeing what we come up with. So don't worry, we're doing both.
Luckily, Wizards of the Coast is so slow to release these Unearthed Arcanas. We will certainly get these all out before the next one.
Yeah.
All right, so to start off, we are just going to go down the line here in the playtest. And the first thing, and one of the most anticipated changes to the Unearthed Arcana is the weapon masteries that have been added. And overall, there are just some changes to the weapons, but I think the weapon masteries are easily the most important part. So weapon masteries, in quick summary here, are just properties that characters that are normally able to be martially focused, your fighters, barbarians, they'll be able to take advantage of these mastery properties that are associated with weapons. Different weapons have different properties as they are. So like a hand axe has Vex. What does Vex mean? Vex means if you hit a creature with this weapon and deal damage to the creature, you have advantage on your next attack roll against that creature before the end of your next turn. So they're kind of just little riders added on to the weapons to make martial characters feel like they've got a bit more tactical options in combat. First thoughts, anyone? I know I have mine, but I don't want to ramble too long.
Yeah, I don't like them in the sense of giving marshals more tactical choices because they're not choices. They're always on things, and I don't think they satisfy that. I like them, though, in terms of making the weapons unique and distinct, because that's just a common complaint. We've definitely complained about it, where within 5th edition here, the weapons, there's kind of usually optimal choices and not huge differences between them, and it's kind of like you just sort of pick whatever, and it's not that big a deal for the most part. Where these masteries do a good job of actually making it a choice of what weapon type you want to use, and maybe even changing it per the situation, and you would have a reason to switch from a great axe to a morning star or whatever,
right?
Based on the situation, because these masteries they're pretty strong. When I was seeing that's all the changes that were to them, was like the weapons, they basically just added masteries. I was worried it was just going to be like on a crit this happens, or like up to your proficiency modifier per long rest you can do this, and it's like, okay, that's not going to be enough to do it. But this is like on every swing, every hit, something cool happens.
Yeah, they're more like cantrip riders, like with Ray of Frost, where it reduces speed by 10 feet when you hit with it. So it is going to come up nearly every single turn. The one thing that I don't love about them is that since they are tied to the weapon, and most of them you don't gain any advantage from doing twice, there's a bit of oddness where it becomes, in most situations, the most optimal move is to attack with 2 different weapons every single time that have 2 different mastery properties. And that just feels a bit odd to me. I don't like that is like the optimal play style, is, because now it is a free action to stow and pull out a new weapon. So it it makes weapon juggling kind of the I don't know about expected, but it is the optimal play style. And that just feels a bit off to me. And we'll probably talk more about that with the fighter as they get more options and more ways to manipulate the weapon masteries and such. But that's one thing that I'm kind of keeping an eye on in terms of just not sitting right.
Yeah, I think an easy fix for that is just make it harder to juggle weapons. I don't remember the exact ruling of how it is in 1D&D. It is a playtest, so I think they could just modify it. So it's like you can't just freely juggle weapons all you want in combat between like all three attacks if you're in a fighter or whatever, because that feels silly, doesn't feel thematic. I have trouble picturing how that would actually work, and so just cut it off. Don't let that happen.
Yeah, I think it was an attempt to make the whole throne aspect a little bit better, so you could like actually draw, daggers endlessly and such. But it was applied to everything, so we'll see where that actually lands. But otherwise, I will say that I think some of these mastery properties are going to feel pretty boring compared to others. I don't love all of them. They're not all equal at this point.
Yeah, there definitely needs to be a good balance pass over them. But overall, like in the terms of the design philosophy to make weapons choice matter, I like that.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And the reason why I even said that it was supposed to be a tactical option, that actually is straight from Jeremy Crawford. That was the intent of these as specified in the video beforehand. Just like these are supposed to provide tactical options. I really don't see a situation where your martial characters are going to be choosing their masteries in the morning or choosing their weapons based off of the enemies that you're fighting on a regular basis, because I think these play more into the general play style you're going for. Like if you're a crit fisher, let's say, then you're probably going to be going for something that gives you advantage, and that's not going to change because you're fighting anything different. I mean, unless it's a huge creature and you're not going to be able to trip them. Okay, maybe that changes what I'm doing a little bit, but otherwise I think it's going to be basically sticking with the same one unless you're doing some weapon juggling to make use of multiple masteries.
Yeah, it's a choice you would make at the beginning of combat, because from what we've seen in the fighter Barbarian, they do get multiple masteries, and so have those different weapons on you, and they get more as they level up, and fighters actually get ways to change them, and I do like that, and we'll talk about that in detail during the fighter video, which we record after this. But otherwise, it is like, yeah, you're seeing where you're fighting. It's like, oh, I'm holding something that could trip, and this thing's huge. So let me stow this and pull something else out, like you said. So it is a tactical choice, but it's like a choice you make at the beginning of combat,
right?
Which does not catch you up to the tactical choices of spellcasters, being able to make a choice of spells to cast and whatever every single round.
Right.
So it's not quite there.
Especially in comparison to what a lot of people were asking for and have been asking for, and that was giving battle master maneuvers to all marshals, basically, or at least full marshals. And we're obviously seeing that's not the direction that they're going. They're trying to accomplish that with the weapons. And I personally am still holding out for some battle master equivalent with, martial dies and different choices that, a huge list of choices. By the end of Tasha's, there was, 20, 30 battle master maneuvers, and being able to give those to all marshals, I feel like would nail this a lot better than what the weapon masteries is doing right now. I don't hate it by any means. I think you're right. It makes weapon choice more interesting, and that is a positive. It almost feels like it's one piece of the puzzle, and we need to have still more to make marshals have that, not only in combat versatility, but out of combat versatility, which battle maneuvers did provide, especially again in Tasha's.
Right. Yeah, like a whole new system applied over top of the warrior type class.
Right.
Say ever like the whole any class has the warrior type has access to this. It's a whole new system that applies over the top. I think that could work.
Right. So it's like it's recognizing the problem, but it's still taking a half measure, in my opinion, to really make any meaningful change on it.
Yeah.
All right. So then we've got spells, and not a ton. We're not gonna go through each spell because a lot of them are class features, but that alone is worth talking about.
Yeah, I don't understand why the design change was done, because like a lot of it very much like at like wizard level 4 or sorcerer level 4, they get a class feature that says you get the arcane eruption spell, and it's always prepared.
And that spell is only available like to wizards,
or sorcerer,
or sorcerer, whatever,
at 4th level, or it's a 4th level spell, but whatever which
goes directly in the other direction from what they were trying to do by making an arcane spell list, a nature spell list. So where they were, they start off by saying, we don't want to have these spell or these class specific spell lists anymore. It takes up too much space. It's too confusing. And then they come in with these class features that are now specific to classes. And you're just remaking that and making it really complicated for people to find out what their ability is. Because now you have to, look at your spell and you say, okay, I have this feature, and this feature gives me a spell. So let me go find this spell. And it's on the other side of the book. And that's just messy. I don't really understand the intent besides, I don't know, making it easier for like a virtual tabletop.
You think that would do it for that? So the Sorcerer 7th level feature, Arcane Eruption. You can now unleash magical energy that roils inside of you. You always have the Arcane Eruption spell prepared. And then you have to go to Arcane Eruption, which is a Sorcerer-only spell that can't be picked, and this is the only way you get it. And you get it at the level. You could get it anyways, and then read what it does. It is effectively no different than just a feature. If they took the description of the Arcane Eruption spell and put it at the 7th level feature here to explain what it does, it's mechanically the same. It makes no difference.
Right.
It just makes it harder to read. It's like what we've talked about with Pathfinder. As much as we love Pathfinder, the rule books are very much kind of self-referential, where you constantly have to, it will like use a keyword for something in a rule and doesn't explain it there, and you have to go and find that, and then in that description uses 2 more, and you have to go and read that to make sure you understand everything. It's building it up that way, because now you can't just look at the 7th level feature and know what you can do as a sorcerer. You then have to go into the spells and find it. And it just makes it, to me, feels like it would be harder to learn the class, to know what you can do. It's a lot of flipping around and stuff. And sure, I guess if everything's digital, you can just click on it and it pops up. I guess that's what you're saying, easier on a virtual tabletop. But obviously not everyone plays that way.
No, it is a lot of, as I understand, the reason why they're making some of the changes they're making is it is difficult to program what the rules are, but being able to codify this just as a spell means that now they can just say, all right, at 7th level, this spell is now always prepared, and it just kind of makes it so that it would then go into your spell list and be where it's supposed to be, because that is the end effect, right? Is you get a spell and it goes into your spell list, and you can, tie that to your spell slots, and that's where the benefit comes from. But for not playing digitally, as said, that it really does just make it a little bit more complicated, and just, again, harder for new players, I feel like, because they're looking at it and they're like, all right, I'm 5th level, what do I get? Oh, I get this spell. All right, let me go over here. Okay, now I actually know what I can do. It's right. Messy. And regardless of whether or not they want to keep them as spells, they could at the very least, just as you've said twice now, just put the spell there. Don't make me go somewhere else for it. Just say, this is what the spell is. Don't have it anywhere else. Don't even have it in the spell list, because it's not part of the arcane spell list. It's just the wizard spell or just the sorcerer spell. So just leave it there.
I mean, yeah. I'm going to go to bat for WotC.
A rare first.
Yeah, when you hit level 5 as a sorcerer, warlock, or wizard, you get a thing, and it's probably a spell. This is not a new pattern. There are dozens of subclasses that give you spells. There's features that give you spells. They've been removed, but we'll talk about that someday. This is a pattern that people aren't going to have to get used to. You get a thing, you look it up in the spell book. That's how spellcasters always worked. And I would also like to say, as the guy, you may remember me from such incredible predictions as they're removing short rests. They're getting rid of spellcasting. Yeah, they are. We thought about like Hunter's Mark and Hex as class features, and we're like, will they become class features? Will they become spells? Turns out they're moving class features into spells. We got it completely backwards. So
yeah, same end result, but
yeah, same end result. But this is what I will say is, I think the sorcerer ones that we were talking about, which are like these damage spells that are cool, very cool, those make sense to me. Whereas they took a lot of the wizards features about how they do stuff, like taking spells out of scrolls and memorizing, and they added some cool stuff, don't get me wrong, but it's spells now when it was features, and they don't feel like spells.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, like modify spell and scribe spell.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Memorize
those
spell.
were class features. They were already kind of baked into, well, scribe spell was already baked into the wizard's class features, and now it just, I mean, being a spell makes it really doesn't even make sense from a thematic standpoint. I've never once considered a wizard casting a spell to be, or scribing a spell to be casting it. It just feels really shoehorned in as a spell.
Yeah,
and all of those do. Maybe we'll talk about that more when we get to the wizard.
Well, I think we just jump around because it's
no,
so whatever.
No, Ellie, we have to be strict on this for the algorithm. I don't know if that works that way. No, okay, no. Yeah, fine. Talk about it.
Because also, like when in the wizard section, it's like they put in how spellbooks work as a class feature with the explanation of, so it's all in the one place, and like that makes sense. I get that it's not this weird sidebar of it; it's an actual feature of having a spellbook.
Sure,
but then within there, it references to you need a cast scribe spell to be able to add to the spellbook, so it's not all in one place, anyways. You still have to go to the spells. And again, I guess if it's all digital, it doesn't matter because it'll be highlighted and you could just put your cursor over it and boom, there it is. But for anyone else who's trying to do this via book, you're flipping around and it's a pain. And since we're on the topic of wizards, and we're trying to keep this as an overview, more general design philosophies, I really dislike how they really leaned into wizards being able to modify spells.
Same.
In the way that they did. We've talked about this before, I think in probably the Sorcerer retro, links at the top, about how fixing sorcerers and making them more distinct from wizards and that kind of conversation, because they could, to new players especially, feel kind of samey, and then sorcerers feel weak. And a really, really common thing from feedback from the community and large is, give sorcerers more spells, they don't have enough spells. And like I get that instinct, but all you're doing is then like making them closer to wizards, because that's wizards thing, and sorcerers are supposed to have a small number of spells that they're really good at modifying and casting to fit their needs. So now in this UA, sorcerers have a shit ton more spells, and they're preparation casters from the arcane spell list, which is the same spell list wizards have access to. And with the justification and like the little sidebar thing in here is like, this was the most requested change, so we're going to do it. And then you go to wizards, and now they have a lot leaning into being able to take the spells that they have and modify them to suit their needs to be able to cast them better. But so sorcerers still have meta magic,
right?
Though.
So they've made the classes even more similar.
Yes. And I would actually say the wizards modify spell stuff is better than the sorcerer's meta magic. It just comes on a little later.
It's way better.
What the fuck are they doing? It's like, keep the classes distinct, and then throw warlocks into the mix, and they are no longer short rest casters. They're like every other. They're like half casters plus. They get, I think, a few more spells than half casters.
Wading in, aren't we?
I know. I say
we are. Fuck it. Whatever. This
is just Ellie's rant time now. No. Let her cook.
So that unique class distinction from warlocks completely ripped out as well. Because again, the common feedback was, warlocks should be able to cast more spells. And it's like, we have enough viewers where I'm sure there are people who watch this who've had that feedback. I'm really trying to not insult people. It just feels like, just play a wizard. You want to be able to cast a bunch of spells and have a lot of versatility when you play the sorcerer or the warlock, then you play a wizard. Warlock
and
is
that's what the point is. That's the class distinction. It's the same reason of if I'm playing a fighter and it's like, man, but I really wish that I had more single target damage and that I had ways to sneak and to hide. Play a rogue. Go play a rogue. That's what a rogue's for. Just there's a reason why there's different classes out there. Multi-class into warlock wizard if you want.
Right. Yeah. And if it's about the
filth.
And it was about the flavor of it. There's no way you can't play a wizard who has some otherworldly patron.
Sure.
That's easy enough to do.
Right.
And of course, yes, then you get like into invocations and stuff, and there are differences beyond just the spellcasting, but like the core difference between sorcerer, wizard, and warlock. Wizard had a huge variety of spells they had access to, like a big tool belt that they could pull out as they needed and prepare every day. Sorcerer had a small number of spells that they were locked into, but they were they dropped the ball on it, but supposedly supposed to be really good at casting them and modifying them to fit the moment via meta magic. And warlocks were the short rest casters in that were approaching it the unique way where they couldn't just be blasting a bunch of spells at once, but they came back on a short rest. And so it was this entirely different resource management pattern, and that fit a different niche so they could keep going as the wizards and sorcerers couldn't. And they was like, fuck it. Just everyone's long rest casters. Sorcerers get a bunch of spells. They're all preparation casters. Wizards can modify their spells. I don't like it. It's
to add on to the sorcerer issue, if we will, a lot of the spells that they now get as class features are blasting spells. So you could even argue a lot of times that sorcerers, that was also their niche, was that they're the ones who are less utility and are more blasting, which, yes, giving that as class features does open that up, but giving them the arcane spell list means that now the spells that they're having freed up to prepare, instead of preparing Scorching Ray, instead of preparing Fireball or Lightning Bolt or any of those, they're like, well, hey, I get that from my class feature. Ooh, I should get more utility spells. So we're just falling into this pattern of now wizards have enough spells to prepare their blasters and their arcane ones, and they've got ritual casting. Okay, that separates them from sorcerers. Great.
A little bit.
Like
right. Rituals come up like once every few sessions, it seems.
Sure. So, I mean, yeah, you're completely smudging the lines of distinction between these classes, and I'm really not a fan of that.
Right. So let's talk real quick, though, about what they actually did to distinguish Sorcerer, because they did try something.
Sure.
And it's something that we all love to pretend to love, and that is just making shit random. Each of their new features is if you roll like a certain thing happens. They're a cantrip. If you roll, if you roll a 6 on the D6 damage, you get another 6. You can get infinite 6s.
Chaos Bolt.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, that's a spell that already exists just in 5th edition. They could just
Sorcerer's Burst. Yeah, they took Chaos Bolt essentially. And they Chaos Bolted everything onto the Sorcerer class. So that's like the idea now.
Yeah, Sorcerer's Burst is the cantrip. Chaos Bolt's the first level spell.
Okay.
So you had to scroll
if you
up
like
to
getting
the spells
excited about
to figure that out.
If you like getting excited about that, good news.
I don't dislike the random stuff, but...
No, I don't, but
I also want it to
as
be
a class-defining feature.
Yeah, I liked it as a subclass-defining feature with the Wild Magic Sorcerer, and then certain spells you could pick, but as like the core Sorcerer class. Nah.
I don't mind it too much per se, and it's really just for those spells. I will say Arcane Eruption, which is the 4th level spell, is definitely an odd one. So that one, not to go too far into the rules, but it's like you roll 6d6 and you can choose one of those d6s, and depending on the one you choose, you get an additional effect. And they really range in power from the first one being incapacitated, and it's an AoE, so you could incapacitate a lot of people, down to 6, which is deafened. But it's choosing any of the 6d6 you roll, so there's a really high chance you're going to get incapacitated every single time, as long as you get a single one. I mean, there's like, I think I saw the math somewhere, like a 30% chance, if not higher, that one of those will be a 1. Maybe it's even higher than that. I can't do math.
Higher,
somebody do put it into any dice and tell me what the percentage is. But when you have one that's supposed to be chaotic, but it's also very clear that there's an optimal choice and you have the option to have a choice, then you're not even getting the chaos right. But it's a strong spell, so I guess that's something.
I mean, kind of. It's a level higher than Fireball, but does less damage. But then it has...
But it incapacitates.
Yeah. Okay.
That sounds like the next update for wizards, though. It's like, oh, you can cast Fireball. Ooh, and it incapacitates everyone. So yeah, I'll just say this turn from let's talk about spellcasting to let's talk about all the spellcasters, but that's fine. It really does seem like there needs to be some decisions made as to what I guess we kind of did this in our retros, right? It's just like, what is this class supposed to be? What does it mean? And what does it feel like when you are a wizard or when you are a sorcerer? And let's make some abilities that back it up, not just trying to make everybody happy because this was the most requested feature and this was the most requested feature. It goes against the claim that Wizards made early on that like, oh, we're going to kill some darlings. You know, you're going to be a little bit upset because we're going to have to rip off Band-Aids because 5th edition had some holes, it had some issues, but we're going to come in and we're going to fix them. And This goes against that entirely.
Yeah. Let's talk about some martials.
Yeah, let's talk about some martials.
Barbarians. So
I like them.
I say, despite the very strong opinions I just had about all of the casters and spellcasting here, barbarians I'm kind of neutral on. I never felt like barbarians were that broken of a class in either direction. They had a very clear character concept, like class identity to them, and they've kept that, and it's just kind of been tuned up in a way where I think it's fine. Like they cleaned some things up, combined some abilities that were separate that didn't need to be. They have mastery as they're a war kind of martial class, so they get weapon masteries right away at level 1, so that's cool. As we already talked about, I don't need a rehash. Rages, you now have the option to keep rage going, which I liked. Again, it kind of talks about it in detail in the little sidebar about how it's now the player's choice to keep rage going. Like rage keeps going because the player chose to hit something or use the bonus action to keep it going, not because something happened to them, which is just nicer. That works.
Agreed. I will say I'd like to see a little bit more for out of combat stuff. This is like my pedestal that I will stand on and shout about forever. Or my soapbox, that's more the term. My soapbox that I will stand on and shout about forever until I see some meaningful change. They added the primal knowledge where they can use a rage to make some of their skills strength based instead of dex or charisma or whatever. A thing that very often would be allowed by DMs, but now it's consuming a rage, which still only comes back on long rest. It would give you advantage on those, which is kind of interesting because if you're raging, you have advantage on strength-based ability checks. And, if you're strength survivaling, then you're now going to have advantage on that if you rage. So it is arguably an all right use of rage, but I think early on it's going to be really hard to justify when you have such a small amount anyways. They did not up the amount of rages you get at all, though they did bring down the class feature of getting a rage back if you're out of them, right?
Yeah, it's earlier now.
But it's still pretty late. It's not like level 5 or something.
17.
Yeah. So
whenever you roll initiative, you regain expended use of your rage. And now they don't get a limit on rages at 20, but I don't think they really need it now. So
no, they never really needed it.
What was it before?
I don't actually think rage resurgence.
Oh, never mind. It never came back. Yeah, it was just that 20th that got infinite. So that's a new thing.
Yeah. So I think tying that to the rage ability is the biggest mistake there because I shouldn't be less good at my combat stuff or have less combat resources because I want to, expend one outside of combat.
Yeah.
That's and we could probably go back and forth about how wizards have to make that choice all the time, but wizards have 15 spell slots. Barbarians, we're going to talk about them having 3 to 4 for most of their class progression, 5 when they get into the middle high tiers, and then capping at 6, obviously, besides the one coming back on a fight. So it's just not enough to justify that as a class resource, and I think they need to pull it out.
I think the question though is what do you do? The only resource barbarians get, the only place they can really squeeze anything out is with rages. The problem, of course, though, is rages the awkward 10 minutes, which makes it really strange to use. Because it's great if you are somehow, in a situation with, your acrobatics, intimidation, perception, stealth, or survival, and then you go directly into combat. Whoa!
Right.
Because you succeeded. That's also good. Yeah. Or the DM's it's been 15 minutes.
That's what Jared was saying. Decouple it from rage. The feature is good on
then couple it to what?
Proficiency bonus.
No, not even proficiency bonus, because they're moving away from that for multi-classing reasons. I agree with that for the most part, but tied to strength
modifier.
Yeah, up to your strength modifier. Why does this have to be complicated? There's so many other class features that do that. I get that we want to keep barbarians to be pretty simple because they're generally more intro classes, but let's not pretend that adding 2 resources is just gonna blow every barbarian player's mind and they'll never be able to figure it out.
So that's the question though. It's like what is that doing though? It's like half your barbarian level you can get advantage on a ability check.
Well, it's not advantage. You could use your strength in place of.
Yeah, and honestly, I would take out
that sucks though.
How does that suck?
I don't care. I'm a barbarian. I hit stuff. You're not here for hitting stuff. Well, get out of the barbarian.
You might not be the right demographic here because you did.
No, I'm the exact right demographic. And the others are wrong.
The idea is that Dungeons and Dragons is not just a combat game. And as the game evolves, it's going to be less focused on the dungeon crawling combat parts. So all classes need to have usability in and out of combat. So if you keep avoiding that, Wizards of the Coast, I'm talking to you. If you keep avoiding that, then we're just going to keep having these circular conversations. So you can argue it all you want, but like classes need to be good at both. And this is one way to make the barbarian good at stealth or whatever. And I don't know. I view that as a positive. And I want to see even more at later levels because this still is just something at second level. And then that's the only thing that they get for out of combat.
All right, but we should move on because we will do a whole barbarian episode and go through every feature as we usually do.
Last tiny thing. Path of the Berserker. It's kind of cool now.
Yeah.
Kind of cool now.
Oh yeah, they fixed it.
Yeah.
Fucking great.
We'll go into that in detail on the Barbarian episode. But I was pretty cheesed about that.
Yeah. Forgot about that.
It was a low bar, but they did surpass it.
Yes. Okay, fighters. Again, I kind of similar thought on what I have with the Barbarian. Like it has its class identity, which it sticks to and didn't need to be completely reworked or anything. And they just kind of tuned it up. They get the weapon mastery, and they even get more flexibility in the weapon mastery than the Barbarians, which is solid because I think they should because they're the fighters, and that's what the fighter is. They're great at all weapons and versatility. I like how they have the ability later on to be able to swap around the mastery on a weapon type. I think it's after every long rest. And then eventually be able to apply 2 weapon types to one weapon and choose every time they make an attack which mastery applies. So that's pretty cool. That's starting to add into that tactical choices that we were talking about.
Right.
I don't think it's quite there of getting... It's definitely not quite there. It's not getting up to the level full spellcasters. But as much as we talk about that, at what point do you just kind of like accept like they're not going to be, if you want that level of complexity, that's why you play a spellcaster. Like there is a point where you realize, okay, we're not going to get them all the way up to the same level of choice as wizards because they're not wizards.
Right.
Like there is a difference.
Yeah, that's when I see both sides of the conversation because people will also talk about how, this is a fantasy game where wizards are casting magic and people will get upset over, the fighter having too many abilities. That's not realistic. It's like, well, none of this is realistic. So why are we drawing the line at fighters being able to do, I don't know, more superhero stuff? I don't know where I fall on that, to be honest, because I do like the fighters grounded a little bit. I like my entire magic systems to be grounded a little bit, but I also love this game, so I don't know. It's it's a tough one, but I will say that I think it's a small step. I don't think it's entirely enough just yet. I'm with you on that. Yeah. The Indomitable change is interesting, is really, really strong now. We'll probably talk more about that in the full thing, but I think that they're recognizing the concept of a fighter being just good in combat is made better.
Yeah, but same with the Barbarian though, also kind of lacking the out of combat stuff. They get some, at least one additional proficiency to pick from.
They were actually done even worse than the Barbarians in that case because they got no class features. It's like you said, they gained the ability to choose persuasion as a skill, and that was specifically listed as a design change. Like, thanks for the breadcrumb, I guess. It didn't really do much. So I'm still just holding out hope that they'll recognize, maybe just. And maybe it's not all martials. Maybe it's just fighters. Like, here you go. Here's battle maneuvers. And that is the class feature. Maybe we don't have this whole weapon adept where you're able to apply 2 different things because your battle master maneuvers can kind of take care of that. I'm still hoping for more. I don't think I'll get it, but I'm going to keep pretending that I'll get something if I yell about it enough.
And then Champion. I think Champion's still just as boring. It's not really.
They fixed it, though, from being complete garbage to being okay, though.
What fixed it?
Features that were literally just dog shit are now no longer just dog shit.
Well, I think we'll leave that as a little teaser. We'll talk about that more in our fighter episode. How about that? We'll do a full comparison of the two and the changes, because it made it a little bit better, but it's still kind of boring.
And then the next three are Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard. Do we have anything else to say on those? No. End of episode.
I think we've got a lot to talk about with the Warlock, or at least something to say about the Warlock, because that is.
I know we kind of covered like the big picture of them, but that's fine. We could go through them.
No, here's something important to say about Sorcerers: additional meta magic options, and being able to change them on a long rest. That was two of our major things we talked about in the Sorcerer remix, redux, whatever. Was that you should be able to change meta magic options on a long rest. That has been satisfied. Box checked. I'm happy.
I'm happy in that sense. You still don't get enough sorcery points, though. Unless I missed it. And again, when we do the in-depth episode, we can confirm that or not. But I do not think you get any additional sorcery points, and that's definitely one of the big problems. You blow through them so fast.
No, you don't get more, but they lowered the cost of a lot of metamatic options.
Just one of them.
I thought
just
it was
Titan Spell. I think it was just Titan Spell, which was insane, costing 3. Anyways,
right. I think you're right. Yeah, just Titan Spell was decreased. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. We
can. And then they kind of go on.
I was just saying we can go into more detail on that on our Sorcerer episode as well.
Yeah.
They tuned them up though. They are a little spicier.
That is true. They're all tuned up a bit.
All right. So then we have the Warlock, which is easily one of the biggest changes. I mean, we've already mentioned it, where they're no longer a full caster in Will's terms. They are actually a half caster down from their short rest recharge. And say Will was right to, again, give credit where credit's due. He's been saying now for months that they're going to be trying to get rid of short rests as much as possible instead of fixing them. And here it is. I mean, we're really not seeing much of anything in terms of short rest abilities. And then Warlocks just get this absolute gut punch, turning them into another bland half caster.
I probably just should sit this one out until we do the full episode. But I will say that I vacillated from just like complete blind rage to like, all right, that's okay. As I read it, each new paragraph, each new heading, it was like, what the? All right. It looks really bad. When you pull up that table that shows the half caster, you're like, I'm going to lose it. I'm going to jump headfirst through my front window. I'm going to try and land on my head and forget what I just saw. And then you look into it and it's like, all right, there's some reasonable stuff here.
There's some good stuff too. I mean, you're right. Like the subclasses being moved to 3rd level, I think is fitting. The 1st level pact boon being getting the pact boon at 1st level instead of 3rd level also just feels so much better. Swapping those around, making those spells a little bit weird, but at least the spells now give you everything you need to satisfy that pact boon. Whereas before it felt like there were invocation taxes. There's still a couple out there, but I do think it's decreased ever so slightly. And you now get at least one more invocation throughout your Warlock career. So, if you took all of those changes and you put it on the chassis of the short rest caster Warlock, I'd actually be pretty happy.
Yeah. And also a unique thing about you can pick the spellcasting ability modifier.
What? I didn't know that.
It's kind of subtly in there, but if you look at the top, primary ability, intelligence, wisdom, or charisma, and then based on what pact boon you pick when you pick it, like if you pick a Pact of the Blade, then you could pick either your primary abilities, wisdom or charisma.
Huh, I totally missed that.
Intelligence or charisma. Yeah. I did too on the first read through for some reason. I don't know why it didn't stand out, because that's kind of big. That's very unique. That is cool. I like
it's
that.
Actually super not unique, because what it does is it's just really, really drags you into samey territory, in my opinion, especially with Pact of the Tome being like wizard features, and then you're an intelligence caster, and it's just
you're just wizard light with medium armor.
I don't even dislike it, and I kind of get where they're going with it, but it's very, very minor, and at best, it's just very samey.
It's a lot better for multi-classing.
Very true, which I don't think... I don't know if Warlock needed much for making multi-classing better and more enticing.
Well, kind of, because they have been very judicious in making sure multi-classing bullshit does not squeak through.
It does seem like more care has been put in than obviously 5th edition. So I guess our show is ruined.
Yeah, it's over. This is the last one.
They still have the issue of, there was that issue like Hexblade, the 1-level dip into being a Hexblade. Mm-hmm. Warlock is like, oh, just too strong for so many classes to pass up, because then you could attack based off of your charisma. They actually made it better, because now, it seems like Hexblade may not even be here anymore, but Pact of the Blade, which is a Pact of Boon, you could pick at first level and make it Wisdom or Charisma, does the same thing as that first level Hexblade feature of allow you to pick Wisdom or Charisma as your spellcasting, or as your attack modifier. So it's actually even better for multi-classing now, because previously it was just like a paladin super benefits, but now like a cleric would super benefit in a 1-level dip into Warlock to pick that up as Wisdom, or a druid, especially like a spore druid. 1-level dip into there of Pact of the Blade, picking Wisdom as the primary. Like, it's like almost, obviously it's hard to make the call without seeing it all as one big picture, but based on what we've seen in our understanding of 5th edition, kind of combining it with this, it seems like Hexblade is one of those dips where it's like almost always worthwhile if you're the right class, and it seems like this is the same, and it's even the right choice for even more classes.
Yeah, the one thing that that makes it somewhat less enticing is at least you're no longer getting spells back on a short rest.
Yeah, that's true.
Which was really, really nice. And I guess the last thing I will say, I don't know how I feel about the multi-classing aspect yet. I think there needs to be a little bit more untangled. So I'm hoping by the time we do our Warlock episode, we'll see more community thoughts around it, and we can steal them and pretend they're our own. No, but just kind of piece those together more. But something I would like to see if they are going to be getting rid of short rests is keeping that pact magic setup and just making it so that warlocks can get their spell slots back on a even shorter rest. Something like 10 minutes, or as an action, they get their spell slots back. Something that is, really tough to do or justify in combat, but it's still possible, and they can only do it, twice a day or something like that. Because that was the expectation anyways, that you're only short resting twice a day. So I just hate them moving away from that entirely. And I feel like this was honestly the laziest option. And the fact that they put it as like Warlock's lack of spellcasting was the most requested thing in the 2021 survey. It's like, I want to see those responses, because I feel like that's not what people were saying at all.
I want to talk to those people. I want to talk. I just want to have a nice chat.
We will not threaten violence against random D&D players.
I just want to talk.
I know. But it just doesn't feel like that's what people were actually saying. And I'm making such a assumption here, right? I didn't have the answers to it, but just based on general community thoughts, it was more like short rests are bad. So that makes warlocks a little bit hard to justify sometimes, because people don't play the way that Wizards of the Coast expected them to. And they took that information and they're like, oh, warlocks don't have enough spell slots. It's like, that's not what anyone was saying. That wasn't it. You missed it entirely.
All right, Wizards.
Yeah, Wizards I actually have nothing more to say about. Because we did, most of their class is spellcasting. They changed, a lot of things to spells. I guess the only thing that I will add is the memorize spell and modify spell are really strong, or at least the modify spell in particular is really strong. And I don't think Wizards needed a buff. I think Wizards could have actually come out of this with 0 changes besides reworks to their subclasses, which they did with Evoker, and I think was totally great changes. And everything else on top of it is just a big middle finger to marshals, when it's the biggest, one of the biggest issues with 5th edition, obviously, is the marshal caster disparity. And they were just like, let's just keep furthering that divide by now making it so wizards don't even need to make concentration checks. Why should they? They are above concentration checks from damage.
Yeah, real quick. Modify spell is a 4th level new spell. It only takes a minute to cast, and then you could take a spell you haven't modified, where like it doesn't require a certain component. If it does require concentration, but it doesn't make a check, you can change the damage type, you can increase the range, you can make it a ritual. And there's also then a way later on to make it permanent. That modified spell is a now permanent spell in your spell book. It's cool, but I kind of would want sorcerers to have it.
It's also so
I disagree
usable.
on that.
Yeah.
You disagree on it being cool, or you want sorcerers to have it? Or all of it?
I think sorcerers suck. I actually don't. I'm just saying that. But I actually do like the idea of this particular thing being a wizard thing, because it actually makes a lot of sense as a wizard thing. You do your nerd study stuff and you're like, oh, I'm going to turn the knobs and turn this into a lightning ball. That's actually very wizard-like.
Sure.
And I think we like lean into the meta magic being like that, but this is fresh, unique. It's probably broken somewhere that we haven't seen yet, but I do like it.
I saw how it was broken already. Actually, it was on Reddit, so I can't give credit where credit's due. But somebody's talking about how the fabricate spell can now be a ritual, and you can just make plate armor because it doesn't have material costs or something like that, and you can just kind of endlessly, destroy any economy by being able to make fabricate a ritual spell. And that's like a 9th.
And that's actually great. That's great. As a DM, you can teach your party what happens when the market gets flooded with plate armor.
It's just going to be like unions coming and busting your wizard up. Like,
and nothing happened because everyone's in plate armor and nobody can hit their ACs anymore.
That would be funny. Like, that's how you really punish them. It's like, oh, wait a second. All of our enemies have plate armor now.
Run into like a bear in the forest, plate armor.
Invincible bears. So yeah, that's really where I land overall. Is wizards just, I don't know, they got a buff. Did they need a buff? Did they need more knobs? Not really. And if they were going to do it, they should have been more subtle tweaks, not the potential that create and modify spell are. There's just too much potential in it.
Mm-hmm.
Scares me.
All right. Is that a wrap on our overview?
Yeah, probably. I think we're supposed to have some advertisement at this point.
Oh yeah. We kept it decently short for us.
Yeah. I feel too worked up to say anything about somebody else. Take it. Fan roll dice. You know the drill. Somebody else do it. I got
fan roll dice. They have cool dice and dice accessories. Use the code MM10 to get 10% off your entire order. This does stack with sales going on. If your order is above $50, you get free shipping. And they really just have a huge variety of really cool dice. You always hold it up to the screen, but at this point I have like the logo taking all of us up and we can't see it. And I just put images on there. So perfect, Jared. Gemstone dice, metal dice, fan roll dice used to be metallic dice games. Good resin dice if you don't want to spend all that money. Big, huge variety of different cool stuff. Liquid core dice. Check them out.
Yes.
MM10.
Thank you. Thank you for taking that in my moment of weakness. And thank you, as always, to our patrons, Cameron C., Ed G., Craig A., Brian H., Isaac M., Jeff W., Star Shinobi, Vincent M., Barons, Bob F., Gray, Joe P., Muddleweight, Rick D., Sensibility20, Tyler S., Adam A., Rob K., and Sir Laugh-A-Lot. You are all fantastic. And if you want to check out the Patreon, you can get early access to episodes like really most of the time. Ellie's been really consistent with it. Like Tuesdays usually. That's a couple days early. Yeah, good stuff. As well as show notes and occasionally other random miscellaneous musings. And if you want to support the show in other ways, you can head on over to monstersandmulticlass.com/support, where you can find that, as well as our other affiliates like Fanroll Dice, Bardly, Describe, so on and so forth.
And as always, thanks for watching.